Stop trying to be understood. Jung insight. There's a particular flavor of exhaustion that doesn't show up after a hard workout or a long shift at work. It shows up after a perfectly pleasant dinner with people you've known for years. You drive home, and instead of feeling closer to anyone, you feel strangely hollow, like you just gave a performance instead of having a conversation. If you've ever felt that and wondered what was wrong with you, here's the uncomfortable possibility. Nothing was wrong with you. You were simply tired from being misread by people who had already made up their minds about who you are, long before you walked into the room. Most of us spend years trying to fix that. We assume if people don't get us, the fix is better wording, more patience, more explaining. We think communication failed, so we try again, softer, clearer, more careful. What almost nobody notices is what's actually happening underneath all that effort. Carl Jung had a much darker read on it. People rarely see you as you actually are. They see you as their own mind allows them to see you. Once that idea lands, it changes how you relate to other people, because suddenly every interaction you have starts to look like two interactions happening at once. Two people in every room. The first version of you is the one that actually exists, your real thoughts, your real motives, the texture of who you are when nobody's managing it. The second version is the role other people have unconsciously assigned you, often without either of you ever agreeing to it out loud. The good son, the quiet friend, the funny one, the sensitive one, the difficult one, the reliable one. Once a group decides who you are, almost everything you do afterward gets filtered through that label, including your own growth, which often gets read as the most suspicious thing you can do. That's because people feel safest when your identity stays predictable. Predictability is what keeps the social order of any group, family, friend, circle, workplace feeling stable. The instant you evolve past the role you were handed, tension shows up, usually in small ways first. You get a little more confident, and suddenly somebody calls you arrogant. You stop over-explaining yourself, and you get accused of going cold. You start setting a boundary, and people quietly start pulling away. None of that happens because you got worse. It happens because the version of you that used to benefit them is disappearing, and people rarely resent your weaknesses. What they resent is the possibility that you might outgrow them. Jung's view was that human beings are constantly projecting unconscious material onto each other. In plain terms, most people aren't actually responding to you. They're responding to their interpretation of you filtered through their fears, their insecurities, their unmet needs, their private frustrations. Once you really absorb that, old memories start rearranging themselves in your head. You remember the times your intentions seemed obvious to you but were read as something else entirely. Kindness mistaken for weakness, quiet mistaken for insecurity, ambition mistaken for selfishness. And from there, an uncomfortable truth sets in. Being understood was never fully within your control to begin with, because real understanding requires self-awareness, and most people simply aren't self-aware enough to see past their own projections. That's also why certain people will quietly punish you for changing, not loudly, but subtly. Their tone cools, their support thins out the moment you stop matching the character they built for you. And here's the part that stings. The more authentic you become, the fewer people feel at ease around you, because authenticity disrupts shared social illusions. Most relationships run on an unspoken agreement nobody says out loud. I'll keep being who you expect, if you keep being who I expect. The moment either person breaks that contract, discomfort moves in. The mask that starts out protecting you. This is part of why so many people leave social gatherings feeling drained without quite knowing why. They think they're tired from talking. What they're actually tired from is performing, managing reactions, adjusting their personality depending on who's standing in front of them, carrying around versions of themselves that stopped feeling real a long time ago. And over time, something genuinely concerning happens. The false self starts getting more social reward than the real one ever did. Jung gestured at this through his concept of the persona, the mask a person builds to survive inside society. At first, that mask protects you. Eventually, it imprisons you, because the more approval you collect for playing the role, the harder the role becomes to put down. The nice person forgets how to express anger. The strong person forgets how to admit pain. The intelligent person becomes terrified of ever looking unsure. Eventually, people stop relating to each other honestly altogether. They relate mask to mask, which is a big part of why so many conversations can feel completely empty. Even after hours of talking, very little truth is actually exchanged. Most people are strategically presenting only the parts of themselves that feel socially safe, while hiding whatever might threaten their acceptance, and the real tragedy is that they often keep this up long enough to forget who they were before the performance started. You can watch this play out in nearly every social environment: classrooms, families, friend groups, offices. Every system, even the well-meaning ones, quietly rewards predictability. A person who behaves consistently is easy to categorize, and categorized people are easier for a group to manage. The moment someone changes unexpectedly, anxiety spreads through the room, because real transformation destabilizes the unconscious order everyone agreed to without discussing it. Think about how strange it feels when someone suddenly develops real confidence, not performative, the genuine kind. The quiet one starts speaking plainly. The people pleaser learns to say no. The environment around them often reacts with jokes, distance, passive aggression, quiet little forms of exclusion. Kindness without limits quietly teaches people how to take advantage of you, and most never realize how much of their personality was shaped by reward and punishment going back to childhood. Smile more, be polite, don't be difficult. Eventually, survival itself gets tangled up with being accepted, and the mind builds a quiet, terrifying equation. If being misunderstood risks rejection, authenticity becomes dangerous, where the shadow lives. This is the point where a lot of people split in two without realizing it. One self becomes the one everyone sees, the other gets buried. Jung called that buried part the shadow, and the shadow doesn't go away simply because you stop looking at it. It waits inside sudden resentment, inside flashes of anger that seem to come from nowhere, inside fantasies you'd never say out loud, inside an exhaustion that makes no logical sense given how little you actually did that day. The more someone suppresses their real impulses in exchange for being liked, the heavier that shadow gets until one day they're no longer sure whether the people around them love them or just love the version of them that's easiest to be around. That realization changes a person, because once you see it, you start questioning every relationship differently. Who actually knows me? And who only knows the role I learned to perform to survive? At some point, a strange kind of loneliness shows up, not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of being unseen. You can sit in a room full of people who are laughing with you, talking to you, who have known you for years, and still feel completely invisible, because somewhere underneath it all, you know they're interacting with a carefully edited version of you, and not the real one. The unsettling part is that they may genuinely, sincerely believe they know you. What makes this so isolating is the realization that most misunderstandings aren't accidents, they're structural. Human beings simplify each other constantly, just to lower the emotional cost of dealing with one another. Your own brain does this too. Fully understanding another person takes a huge amount of emotional energy, so instead, the mind builds shortcuts. He's insecure, she's difficult, he's successful, she's emotional. Once a label forms, the mind starts filtering everything through it. Evidence that supports the label gets remembered. Evidence that contradicts it gets quietly dropped. That's part of why changing someone's perception of you can feel nearly impossible. You're not really fighting their opinion of you. You're fighting the stability of their entire internal world. Because if they got you wrong, they have to consider that they might be getting other people wrong too, possibly even themselves. Most people will avoid that thought at almost any cost. It's psychologically safer to reduce another person to a fixed identity than to sit with how complicated human beings actually are. This is where Jung's ideas start to feel genuinely uncomfortable, because he believed that what irritates us most in other people often reveals parts of ourselves we've disowned. The arrogant person triggers somebody's hidden insecurity. The confident person stirs up buried self-hatred in someone nearby. The free person reminds others of a cage they agreed to live in years ago. That's why authenticity creates friction. Not because authenticity is offensive on its own, but because it unconsciously confronts people with the parts of themselves they gave up a long time ago. People who suppress their own anger tend to resent direct people. People who buried their own dreams tend to resent independent ones. People who built their whole identity around being approved of secretly fear the ones who no longer need that approval at all. Most relationships, in fact, don't end when respect disappears. They end when awareness shows up. The quiet power game underneath conversation. Once you start noticing these patterns, social interaction stops sounding the same. You hear things underneath the words, a compliment that sounds slightly threatened, concern that functions more like control, advice quietly designed to keep you small. Much of human communication is really an unconscious negotiation. Who apologizes first? Who seeks approval? Who tolerates disrespect? Who explains themselves too much? These small moves quietly decide the power dynamics underneath a relationship. Here's the part that catches people off guard. The person trying hardest to be understood is often the first to lose psychological leverage, because excessive explanation sends a message underneath the words, "Please validate my reality." Manipulative people pick up on that instantly. They learn that your confusion makes you weaker, that withholding understanding gives them control, that if they question your intentions long enough, you'll eventually question yourself. That's why some people walk away from a conversation feeling oddly guilty, even when they did nothing wrong. Their nervous system got pulled into defending an identity that was never being fairly examined. And the more emotionally dependent someone becomes on being understood, the easier they are to destabilize. There's a point some people quietly reach where they simply stop explaining themselves, not out of anger, but recognition. They realize constant self-justification is often a polite form of begging to be seen correctly, interpreted fairly, to exist inside someone else's head without distortion. But human beings are not neutral observers. They see through wounds, ego, fear, envy, their own private desires. Even love distorts perception, maybe most of all, because the people closest to you often have the biggest stake in the version of you that keeps their own world stable. A parent might unconsciously resist a child's independence because that dependence gave their own life meaning. A friend might discourage your growth because your old insecurity made them feel better about their own. A partner might insist they want total honesty right up until your honesty threatens the dynamic they've leaned on for years. Most people don't see reality clearly enough to notice attachment doing this. What they're tracking is emotional utility. Who comforts them, who validates them, who threatens them. Once you see this, a darker realization follows. A lot of people never actually wanted the real you. They wanted predictable access to whatever emotional role you filled: the listener, the rescuer, the entertainer, the obedient one. When that role disappears, the connection weakens not because you betrayed anyone, but because the unconscious arrangement ended. This is part of why growth can feel lonelier than the suffering before it. Suffering keeps a relationship familiar. Growth restructures it, and people get uneasy once they can no longer place you where they're used to finding you. Notice how fast people respond to real transformation, with some version of "you've changed," usually said, with quiet disappointment, as if change itself were the problem, when change is one of the most natural things about being alive. What people often mean is "you no longer behave in a way that's comfortable for me." That single sentence quietly explains a lot of broken friendships and relationships that slowly went cold. The cost of becoming real. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. What's easy to miss is the real cost attached to that privilege. Becoming yourself unsettles people, because authenticity forces everyone around you to confront their own masks. Someone who gave up on their own dreams feels uneasy around a person chasing theirs without apology. Someone stuck in people-pleasing feels irritated by anyone else's boundaries. Freedom exposes captivity, and people resent reminders of the cages they agreed to live in voluntarily. That's why some people subtly undercut your individuality while insisting they only care about you. Be realistic. Don't change too much. You used to be different. The words sound harmless, but underneath is often a quiet fear that your transformation threatens the old arrangement built around the person you used to be. And here's the harder truth. Some people will only support your growth as long as it doesn't pass theirs. The moment your confidence becomes undeniable, their warmth quietly changes temperature, not always on purpose, which is exactly what makes it easy to miss. People are fully capable of undermining someone while sincerely believing they're helping them. Once that lands, your relationship with conflict changes. You stop assuming every misunderstanding can be solved with better communication, because some people misread you on purpose, others out of their own baggage, and plenty because truly seeing you would require facing something about themselves first. Understanding another human being takes the death of certain illusions: flexibility, humility, self-awareness. The ego prefers certainty because certainty feels safe. So instead of asking, "Who is this person, really?" most people unconsciously ask, "How does this person fit into the picture I already have of the world?" One question searches for truth. The other searches for comfort, and comfort almost always wins. That's part of why people get oddly uncomfortable around someone who refuses to keep defending themselves. Silence interrupts the script. When you stop over-explaining, people lose easy access to your emotional center. They can no longer pull your strings through your need to be validated. Strangely, that often frustrates people more than the original disagreement did, because by that point the person arguing with you may not even care about the issue anymore. What they want is confirmation that their read on you is still dominant. We've all absorbed the idea that we owe the world a constant explanation of our own humanity, but there's a hidden cost in endless self-justification. Over time, it teaches your mind that your inner reality needs outside permission to count as real. And once someone's stability depends on being understood by others, they become fragile. One accusation can rattle them. One rejection can warp how they see themselves, because their whole sense of self lives inside other people's perception rather than inside themselves. This is exactly what Jung was pointing at with the idea of individuation becoming psychologically whole, separate from collective expectation, not socially approved, whole. Those are two very different things. Social approval is conditional, wholeness is internal. Someone chasing approval is constantly scanning the room. Do they like me? Did I say the wrong thing? Am I accepted here? Someone working toward individuation starts asking different questions entirely. Am I betraying myself just to stay comfortable? What parts of me only exist for survival? What truth have I been avoiding because acceptance felt safer? Those questions are uncomfortable for a reason, because eventually you start noticing how often your personality shifts, depending on whoever's in the room with you. A different laugh, a different tone, different opinions, a different emotional temperature. And then a genuinely unsettling thought arrives. If your identity changes in every room you walk into, which version is actually you? Most people avoid that question for as long as they can. They keep adapting automatically until the adapting itself becomes their identity. But underneath all that performance, the psyche keeps the receipts. It remembers every flash of anger you swallowed, every opinion you went quiet on, every ambition you downplayed so nobody around you would feel threatened. The shadow doesn't forget anything. And eventually all that suppressed authenticity turns into a quiet resentment toward life itself. Not because life did something wrong, but because you kept choosing to betray yourself in exchange for belonging. The frightening part is that self-betrayal almost never feels dramatic while it's happening. It just feels practical. A small compromise here, a small silence there. You laugh at something that actually bothers you. You go quiet rather than create tension. None of it looks like much in the moment. But years later, a lot of people wake up with a strange emptiness they can't quite explain, because every suppressed instinct leaves a residue behind. The body remembers what the mouth never said, and eventually the mind turns against itself. Anxiety, resentment, emotional numbness, sudden exhaustion around specific people, not random noise, but the psyche flagging that too much of your existence has gone artificial. The loneliness of being loved for the wrong reasons. This is why a lot of people feel genuinely worn out around certain groups but oddly alive when they're alone. Solitude removes the performance. For a little while, there's nothing to manage, no expressions to monitor, no responses to calculate, nothing to shape into something easy for someone else to digest, just quiet. And in that quiet, the buried self slowly starts to surface. That's part of why so many people are afraid of being alone, not because solitude itself hurts, but because silence exposes whatever truth has been sitting unresolved underneath everything else. A distracted mind can dodge itself indefinitely. A quiet one can't. Jung believed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will keep steering your life, and you'll call the result fate. That's what plays out in ordinary social life. People repeat the same patterns for decades, because they never examine the unconscious fears running the show. Fear of rejection, of being left, of becoming unlikable, of outgrowing the people around them, and maybe most of all, the fear of being seen too clearly. Genuine visibility changes relationships. The moment you stop performing weakness, certain people drift away. The moment you stop over-explaining, manipulative people get exposed almost instantly. Because healthy people don't need you to constantly defend your reality, only people with something to gain benefit from your confusion. Once you see that clearly, something cold starts forming inside you. Not hatred, discernment. You notice how many relationships run on quiet emotional dependence, how often guilt gets used as invisible social control, how often society rewards compliance and just calls it kindness. The obedient get called good, the self-abandoning get called caring. Meanwhile, the person finally setting boundaries gets called selfish because boundaries interrupt access, and people frequently confuse love with access to your energy. Access isn't love. Control isn't love. A surprising number of relationships only survive because one person hasn't found the nerve to be fully themselves, and once authenticity walks in, illusion starts to die, and illusion fights hard to stay alive. Most people don't consciously lie about who they are. They simply get used to the version of themselves that draws the least resistance, and after enough years, mistake that adaptation for an actual identity. But somewhere underneath, something always knows the difference. The shadow always knows. And sooner or later, every unlived truth comes back as suffering. Eventually, a person reaches a fork almost nobody talks about openly. Keep being understood, or start being real. The two paths split apart the moment real transformation begins. The authentic self is messy, unpredictable, full of contradictions. Society prefers simpler characters, easy people, readable people, manageable people. That's why the world keeps rewarding consistency, even when it's false. The person who performs agreeableness non-stop gets called mature. The person quietly swallowing resentment for years gets called peaceful. But underneath a lot of acceptable personalities, there's accumulated decay, and the longer someone avoids facing it, the further they drift from themselves. This is part of why certain people seem to explode out of nowhere after years of staying quiet. Years of adaptation collapse at once, and the shadow forces its way into the light. Whatever stays unconscious doesn't disappear. It builds pressure, like water collecting behind a dam, until one day the structure cracks. The truly unsettling part is how much of a life can get built around avoiding disapproval without anyone noticing. Even people's dreams get quietly edited, careers others respect, relationships others approve of, opinions that keep the peace, not because any of it is authentic, but because rejection felt unbearable. People trade authenticity for acceptance slowly enough that they hardly notice the exchange, until one day they're surrounded by people who love a version of them that doesn't feel real anymore. Being loved for a mask is, in a strange way, lonelier than being alone, because now even the affection feels disconnected from the truth. That's often where a real turning point begins. People stop asking, "How do I make people understand me?" and start asking, "Why am I sacrificing myself for people committed to misunderstanding me anyway?" That question redirects everything toward integrity, toward figuring out which parts of your personality were built out of fear rather than truth. You start noticing where you automatically shrink yourself, where your voice gets quieter than it needs to be, where your own instincts get overridden by the desire to stay liked. And slowly, something starts to shift. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your inner world. You stop panicking the moment someone gets you wrong, because you've finally seen something cold and clear. Some people need you to stay misread. Your clarity threatens whatever advantage they were getting from your confusion. Your boundaries quietly reveal exactly who had been benefiting from your lack of them. Silence starts to feel different in your body, not weakness, but power. The power of no longer needing the whole world to understand you in order to feel like your existence counts. The power of letting people build whatever version of you helps them sleep at night, while you keep quietly transforming anyway. That's the real starting point of individuation, not the moment the world accepts you, but the moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep the world comfortable. Being misunderstood isn't always a failure of communication. Sometimes it's simply the fallout of becoming someone the people around you can no longer control. Most people will never openly admit how much control quietly shapes their relationships, not loudly, but constantly, underneath almost everything. But the ones who finally see it rarely go back to who they were before. There's a strange relief on the other side of all this, even though it doesn't show up right away. For a while, letting go of the need to be understood feels like loss, like you're handing something over without getting anything back. But what actually happens is quieter and stranger than that. You stop spending your energy managing other people's perception of you, and you get that energy back for your own life. The friendships that were really just transactions start to fade on their own, without a single dramatic conversation. And the people who were never asking you to perform anything, who liked you on the days you were tired, unimpressive, uncertain, or simply yourself without an edit, those relationships don't go anywhere at all. If anything, they get steadier, because there's finally nothing left to manage between you. You don't have to announce any of this to anyone. You don't owe an explanation for why you stopped explaining. The next time someone tells you that you've changed, you don't have to defend it or apologize for it. You can just let the sentence sit there, because it was never really a complaint about you. It was a confession about what they were used to. And once you can hear it that way without flinching, something in you settles that no amount of being understood ever quite managed to settle before. Maybe that's the whole point of growing up the second time. The slower and less obvious time. The time nobody throws a party for. You stop needing the world to read you correctly, and you start trusting what you already know about yourself instead. It's a quieter kind of freedom than people usually advertise, but it's the kind that holds. Now, I'd like to share a meaningful story with everyone. Speak of the dead. Whenever my mother calls, she talks about dead people. This morning I am laying bacon strips on the microwave dish when the phone rings. I check the caller ID. My mother. I cradle the phone against my shoulder and continue fixing breakfast. Within seconds she asks, "You remember Gladys Berger?" "Who?" "You know, she always wore that flowered hat. She sat in the back pew at church. I haven't attended her church in 30 years. I certainly don't know Gladys." "Sure," I say, as I crack 4 eggs into the frying pan, then drop bread into the toaster. I wonder if Stan's still sleeping upstairs. He usually wakes early on the weekend, especially when he smells bacon. "Well," my mother continues, "she's a widow. Her husband dropped dead yesterday. Got out of bed and keeled over, right there. Gladys found him. Cerebral hemorrhage, they said." "Uh-huh," I mutter. "That's a shame." I think, at her age, she's gotten used to losing people. I slide the eggs onto plates, burn my fingers picking up the bacon, then begin buttering the toast. She says, "He was only 56, same as Stan." "Really?" I wonder again what's keeping him. Suddenly, I hear a loud thud above me. I cover the phone and yell, "Stan?" No answer. My mother is saying, "Those hemorrhages can happen to anyone, you know, even young people." Another thump, louder. I drop the knife. It clatters to the floor. "Gotta go, Mom." I toss the phone onto a chair. I huff up the stairs. My blood pulses in my temples. My hand trembles as I twist the doorknob. Will my husband be crumpled on the floor? Still dressed in pajamas, he sits on the edge of the bed. He holds his black shoe in his hand. I catch my breath, sigh. "Stan, what's going on?" He grins boyishly, turns the shoe over. I see a dark, smashed object on the heel. "Black Widow," he says. Dear viewers, that was our channel's discussion on the topic, why what a healed empath really becomes Jung insight. If you found this video helpful or meaningful, please consider subscribing to support the channel. If you'd like me to create more content about emotions, relationships, or other psychological topics, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'll do my best to help you understand why you're feeling the way you do and what's really happening beneath the surface. For now, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thank you.